Hi, so you might remember me from the last time I was the bead lady, but today I'm going to be the felt lady. And I'm going to show you some kinds of surfaces and other objects that I've made out of sheep's wool. So these are three topologically equivalent surfaces. This isn't one of them, but it's about the same size to give you a sense of the scale of what you're looking at. And although they're colored to look like they have two sides, they all actually only have one. Here's another set that are all equivalent to a Mobius band with an extra hole. And the way that I make these is I start with a piece of high-density foam. I put a piece of fabric on, like maybe cotton or silk, little tufts of wool to cover the fabric, and then I use a needle felting needle to poke it all together. That you stab the wool into the fabric. Needle felting needles are longer than regular needles, and they have little barbs on them that are smaller than a fish hook, but you can still feel them with your fingers. You pull the little sandwich off of the foam and flip it over and roll the fiber over the edge and needle felt that in and add more wool. And so that you have this like sandwich with the fabric on the inside. And if you want to make a Mobius band like this one, you add a half twist and layer the ends together and needle felt it. And then I like to wet felt it afterwards, so that consists of making it wet with water. And then you agitate it and it shrinks and the fibers tangle together. And on a molecular level, they actually ratchet down. There's little barbs on wool that make this an irreversible process. And you get these wonderfully strong and soft and unbreakable and flexible pieces of felt. So here are a couple Seifert surfaces I did, Seifert, where I started with like a Y-shaped piece of fabric and did that little wool sandwich to it and twisted it and joined the ends and then wet felted them. Here's a Seifert surface for a figure 8 knot. This piece is a little bit bigger. It's about that big. Here's a Bromian link set. So I have the link on the bottom right and then two different surfaces, one of which has the edge of the link and one doesn't. So the puzzle is to figure out which one's which. Here are two different links with 4 components. They're actually the same link, just in 2 different sizes and different configurations of the same objects. I just rearranged them and took different photos. So these have a crocheted chain core. So it's a similar technique, but instead of using fabric on the inside, I'm using string. And that way it controls the length of the piece, since the wool has a tendency to stretch and shrink in unpredictable ways. By putting a core on the inside, you can keep the thing a little bit controlled. So if you want to turn it into, say, a bracelet, you'll end up with something that fits when you're done. So these are the same 2 pieces. At one point, I did a workshop back in California, and Vi wanted to make a hyperbolic surface. And at this point, I figured out that if we did, instead of the interior of the pentagons, we did the edges using the same kind of crochet technique, that this would extend the idea and allow us to do a lot more interesting things, like a hypercube, for example, which you can flip inside out. And then I started making bracelets. So here's one of them. And these have, again, the crocheted core. And the picture on the right, it speaks to both the strength of the felt and also how light it is. It has almost no weight at all. And here are a few more photos. And on the left, you can see you can smash them, and then they'll just pop back to the way they were. So felt is it's a magical kind of material. And here's a bracelet that, again, I used with the crochet interior. And here's another photo. This is the same piece. If you wet felt and then form it and let it dry, it'll just stay in whatever position you make it in. So this is sort of 2 different ways that I dried exactly the same piece. So here you can see what one of these pieces looks like before I put the wool over the outside of it. And then I put it over foam. I put little tufts of wool over it. You can see the needle felting needle on the bottom left. I go through and open the holes back up and add more wool until I end up with this sort of enormous, fluffy thing. And then I wet it and agitate it. and poke the holes in, and eventually I end up with a bracelet. Here's another example. Before it was wet felted, and then after. So you get a sense of how much these things shrink down. And the last image is this piece here. I'm doing a workshop on topologically interesting felt. So if you'd like to come and make a Mobius band or something more interesting tomorrow, I'd like to invite you to come to my workshop. Thank you.